With the SEC going to 9 conference games, there's a possibility that West Virginia and Alabama drop their series, their home series that's scheduled for 2026 and 2027. That means that West Virginia has to replace Alabama with somebody else. Who would it be? Who makes sense? Well, in this episode, we're going to talk about that, and I'm going to give you one scenario that just might work, and I think most Mountaineer fans will be happy with it. So let's talk about it. What is up, and welcome to this episode of Couz's Corner, your home for top shelf college sports news and analysis around the West Virginia Mountaineers and the Big 12. So we've all heard by now, SEC is going to 9 conference games. We all know that could potentially cause West Virginia and Alabama to drop their home series. It would probably make West Virginia happy, to be perfectly honest. I don't think they really want to play that series anyway, but they really haven't had a great way out of it. Wren Baker was asked about it in today's press conference. I'm recording this on Friday, August the 22nd. He was asked about it in his presser, and he admitted, I saw it coming. This didn't surprise me. And he said he's already been having some conversations behind the scenes, he and his staff, with potential opponents, potential future opponents, including, you guessed it, the Pitt Panthers. As a matter of fact, he threw a little jab at Pat Narduzzi. You know, Pat Narduzzi took credit for saying, hey, we want West Virginia back on the schedule. We're willing to move our schedule around to do it. Well, guess what Wren Baker brought to our attention? He said the only reason that was even brought up is he said, I had just had a phone call with somebody at Pitt about continuing the series. So it wasn't their idea. So Narduzzi, shut your trap. Anyway, we're going to talk about Pitt a little bit more detail and look at their schedule and talk about how it may work. Now, I talked about in a previous live show I did yesterday, would they add Marshall to the schedule maybe for at least 2027? You can listen to that and hear what I had to say about that in the link I'll leave you at the end. And I even touched on a few of these teams I'm going to talk about today, but today I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about it. I'm a little bit more organized, and we'll look at, will any of these make sense? Now, I'm going to preface this by saying none of these are going to be easy to do. You can't just plug and play, because West Virginia's opening the season with Alabama, or is scheduled to open the season with Alabama the next 2 years, 26 and 27. Most of these other teams already have opening day games on their schedule. So the game they might drop would not necessarily be the same week that West Virginia's dropping Alabama if it happens. So how would that work out, right? How do they move their other opponents around? Can they? There's so many moving parts around these kind of things, man. I'm just glad I'm not the one having to sit down and figure all this out. I'm just a guy who can get on here and talk about it and don't really have skin in the game. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. I've got a few Power 4 teams and a few G6 teams that could potentially replace Alabama. There's one team on here that I think makes the most sense, and it is another Power 4 team, and it's one that I think most of you fans will be happy with. And it's Louisville. I'll just be honest with you, it's Louisville. And I'll go into more of the details later in the video, but I think Louisville is the one they might actually be able to make work the easiest. But let's talk about some other let's talk about Pitt. Would Pitt work? Well, when you look at Pitt's schedule for 2026, right now, they already have 2 games on their schedule with Power 4 opponents. They play at home against UCF and at Wisconsin, along with a G6 opponent in Miami of Ohio. Now, it's very feasible that Pitt may want to drop that Wisconsin game, and here's why. They play Wisconsin again in 27, but they're giving up a home game to do it because the game is scheduled to appear or to be played in Ireland, in Dublin, Ireland. The networks and the conferences likely don't want Pitt or Wisconsin to give that game up, so they'll likely play it. But would Pitt be willing to give a game up at Wisconsin to play West Virginia in 2026? It's very possible. But here's the challenge with that. West Virginia is supposed to host Alabama in 2026, and I doubt they want to give up a home game. But would Pitt be willing to travel to Morgantown 2 years in a row because they're traveling to Morgantown this year? I highly doubt it. Then when you look at their 2027 schedule, in addition to the Wisconsin game, they do have an opening on their schedule, and they have no other Power 4 opponents on their schedule. So could they add another Power 4 opponent in West Virginia in 2027? Maybe. But again, they would have to move other games around to fit the opening day game, or West Virginia would have to move some of their other games around to fit the game in Pitt, in the slot on Pitt schedule. And let's not forget, West Virginia plays UVA in Charlotte in 2026. That game might be hard to move because it's at a neutral site, and the schedule of the site matters too. What other events do they have going on there that time of the year? Are they hosting concerts? Are they hosting other games? Right. So that you got that to worry about. So how do you move the games around to make it work? It might be doable. And apparently they've been having the conversation. It would be really cool if we see the Pitt series continue in 2026 and 2027. Now there's a catch here. It's very possible the ACC may also go from 8 to 9 conference games. And if that happens, then Pitt loses that opening on their schedule for 2027 unless they drop a game against somebody else. And again, I don't see them dropping the Wisconsin game in Dublin because that would probably piss off networks. It would probably piss off Wisconsin, and it would probably piss off the ACC and maybe even the Big Ten because there's going to be big money attached to that game. So maybe Pitt works. Well, let's take a look at a couple other former or I don't even want to say former, but maybe rivals that West Virginia hasn't played in a long time. Let's look at Syracuse, an old Big East rival. Right now, Syracuse has Notre Dame on their schedule for 2026. It's the only P4 game on their schedule. But you know they're not dropping Notre Dame. That's a big money game for the networks, for the conference. It's part of a contractual agreement that Notre Dame has to play 5 ACC teams every year. It would mess that up if the game got dropped. They're not dropping Notre Dame. Now, maybe they would drop one of their other opponents, a G6 or a FCS, but I doubt it, especially if they have to add another conference game. And then in 2027, they have to travel to Penn State as part of a home and home with Penn State for 27 and 28. You don't want to give that up. Now, they do have 2 other openings on their schedule. Maybe you add West Virginia to it. But again, if you don't add them in, how do you do a one-off against Syracuse? Do you have it at a neutral site in 2027? Maybe. Do you play Syracuse in Washington, D.C. or somewhere? That might work for 2027. So maybe that's a possibility. But again, I doubt Syracuse, especially if they have to add another ACC contest. I don't see them playing two P4 opponents in the non-conference, and they're not dropping the Penn State game, I don't think. What about Virginia Tech, Couz? I've heard some people say Virginia Tech. Well, I'm as a person who lives in southern West Virginia, I actually consider Virginia Tech a bigger rival than Pitt down here because I'm only an hour from Blacksburg. I would love to see that game back on the schedule, but I don't see it how it would work because Virginia Tech has a 4-year agreement, a home and home agreement with Maryland. They have to go to Maryland in 26, and Maryland comes to Blacksburg in 27. And also, when you look at 2027, Virginia Tech also has Notre Dame on their schedule for 27. And again, part of that ACC agreement, they're not going to be able to give that game up. Now, they do have another opening on their schedule in 27, but you're not adding a third Power 4 team in the non-conference. Not happening. And again, if the ACC adds an extra conference game, that opening won't be there. So, who else are we going to look at? Let's talk about the team that is supposed to play Virginia Tech in those games, and that's Maryland. This one could potentially work. They play, like I mentioned, it's a 4-year home and home series with Virginia Tech from 2026 through 2028, or 29 rather. It's very possible Maryland could drop the first 2 games of that series with Virginia Tech in 26 and 27. Now, that would put Virginia Tech in a little bit of a bind, but it's something that they might consider doing, maybe. But would Maryland see more value in playing Virginia Tech, or would they see more value in playing West Virginia? I don't know the answer to that question. My guess is they would see more value in playing Virginia Tech, but I don't want to make that assumption. But if they choose to drop Virginia Tech in place and replace them with West Virginia, it might just work. Now they might have to move other games around to make it work, but it's possible. But again, I think it would be tough because then you leave Virginia Tech in a bind, and then they don't have anybody to fill their game with. And remember, sometimes, depending on how the contract's written up, sometimes dropping games cost you money, sometimes millions. So it's not that simple. All right, now we're going to talk about a few G6 teams that I took a look at because, West Virginia right now in 26 has 2 P4 games on their schedule with Alabama and Virginia. Ren Baker has been adamant he really would rather only play one. So he probably would like to play a G6 team, especially in 2026, to replace that Alabama game. So we're going to take a look at a few. But first, I want to give a shout out to my sponsor here, Appalachia Digital. They are the folks who designed the website over at WVSportsChat.com, where myself, Jonathan Martin, and some others are doing some writing over there. They did a great job designing that site. It's a very professional looking site. I recommend you go see it, WVSportsChat.com. But Appalachia Digital, if you want them to design you a brand new website, or if you already have a site and you want it to get found easier on Google, you can go right now to AppalachiaDigital.com/Couz. Let them know I sent you and check them out. Reach out to them. Let them know you need a quote, and they'll be glad to help you out. And even if you own a small business and you just want your website to be a better website, they can do that too. You don't have to be a content creator or a blog. Any type of website out there, they can help you with. Go check them out, AppalachiaDigital.com/Couz. Now, let's go ahead and talk about a few G6 schools. Now, somebody brought up something interesting on X. What about Coastal Carolina? You know, West Virginia's new president coming up from Coastal Carolina, and we all know West Virginians, we love to go to Myrtle Beach, right? Could you imagine how many West Virginia fans would be in Conway, South Carolina, watching that game on the teal turf if West Virginia traveled down there to play? That would be pretty phenomenal. I would probably try to go. Spend quite a bit of time at Myrtle Beach in my lifetime. I enjoy Myrtle Beach. I'd probably go to the game. But would it work? Let's look at it. In 2026, right now, Coastal schedule's full. Not sure how they'd make it work. Maybe they would want to drop a game against, a G6 or an FCS team to get a P4 team on their schedule. Maybe they'd be, because they could get a pretty nice payday to come to Morgantown and play. West Virginia could get rid of that extra non-conference P4 game, get Coastal Carolina in Morgantown, pay them a little bit, but you get that extra home game to offset the cost, right? Because you get to sell more tickets, merch, concessions, the whole 9 yards. And you don't lose your home game. Now, is it going to sell as many tickets as Alabama? No, it's not. But you also give yourself a little bit easier opponent. Now, in 2027, Coastal actually has 2 openings on their schedule. So would West Virginia be willing to not play any P4 teams at all in the non-conference, in 2027, and actually travel to Coastal Carolina? I doubt that would happen. I don't see that happening. But heck, who knows? Who the heck knows? Maybe they're willing to do that. And if they do, I could actually see Coastal Carolina making it work if they're willing to drop one of their other games in 2026 and maybe moving a game or two around in 27 along with the Mountaineers. Now, Old Dominion, I looked at Old Dominion because they're at one state over in Virginia. Don't see how that would work. I don't really see any. They do have an opening in 27, but nothing in 26. I looked at James Madison. They already play a Power 4 team in 26 and 27. They play Virginia Tech in 26. They play Maryland in 27. I don't see them wanting to play 2. And plus in 26, they don't have any openings on their schedule right now. They do have one in 27, but do they really want to play a one-off against West Virginia when they're already having to travel to Maryland? Maybe they would. Maybe they'd like that extra paycheck, but I doubt it. Now, I even looked at Notre Dame and UConn, the independents, because I thought, you know what? They're independents. They kind of make their own schedule. Again, it'd be complicated. UConn has no openings in 26. They do have one in 27, but it's later in the year. Notre Dame has an opening in 26, but it's later in the year. Nobody's going to want to drop Notre Dame off their schedule. It'd be tough to move things around. 27, they have multiple openings, but again, they're all later in the year. Maybe you do it with Notre Dame, but again, do you really want to play Notre Dame and Virginia in the same year in 2026? Well, if you're dropping Alabama, do you really want to replace them with Notre Dame? I doubt it. I don't know that you're helping yourself there any, right? Unless you just don't have another choice. Now, Notre Dame will sell tickets. That's for sure. But because their openings are so late in the year, it might be hard to make it work because that's when West Virginia is playing their conference games. So it'd be tough. But now let's talk about the one team that would actually potentially work. Let's talk about the Louisville Cardinals. Okay? I actually figured out a way that West Virginia and Louisville could make this work. Okay? Hear me out. This is a little bit convoluted, so pay attention. In 2026 and 2027, Louisville has a home and home series with 2 SEC opponents. Because let's remember, right now, both the SEC and the ACC are only playing 8 conference games. So Louisville took advantage of that and scheduled 2 games against SEC opponents in the non-con. One of those is against Kentucky. That's a rivalry game. I doubt they're going to want to drop that one. I doubt Kentucky's going to want to drop that one. But it's possible Georgia might decide, hey, just like Alabama may drop West Virginia, Georgia might look at their schedule and say, hey, we can drop Louisville off our schedule to pick up this extra SEC game. If they do that, then that opens up the option for them to play a home and home against West Virginia in 26 and 27. Now, I know what you're thinking, but Couz, you just told us the dates may not make sense. I actually, with Louisville, figured out how it would work, potentially work anyway. In 2026, again, pay attention. In 2026, Louisville opens the season, on the schedule at least, they open the season with Villanova, their FCS opponent. West Virginia's opening the 2026 season, supposedly with Alabama, right? West Virginia loses the Alabama game in Morgantown. If Louisville is able to move that Villanova game to another week, they could come to Morgantown in week 1 of the 2026 season. Wouldn't that be pretty fun to get Louisville back on the football schedule? An old Big East rival from the early to mid 2000s? That'd be pretty fun, wouldn't it? And I know and Villanova, they don't even have their schedule completed for 2026 yet. So it's possible they could be willing to move their Louisville game to another date, potentially. Now, what about 2027? Well, let's look at 2027. In 2027, the Georgia-Louisville game is expected to be played on September the 18th of 2027. Okay? West Virginia is scheduled to play Ohio U. That's the Ohio U's return trip to Morgantown is scheduled for September 18th, 2027. It just so happens that Ohio U has a bye week, the opening week of the 2027 season, which is when West Virginia was originally supposed to play who? Alabama. So if Ohio U is willing to open the season in Morgantown and then take the 18th as their bye week, that means West Virginia would be free to travel to Louisville on the 18th of September, 2027, if the Georgia game gets dropped by Louisville. You get Louisville back on the schedule. You get a pretty regional opponent, a former rival, 2 pretty evenly matched teams with similar resources in similar situations. I think that would be pretty darn fun to have Louisville back on the schedule. Now, I would prefer to have Alabama on the schedule. I was excited about this Alabama series. But I understand how things work, and sometimes things just don't happen. But if you're going to replace them with somebody, and it can't be Pitt or it can't be Virginia Tech, it might as well be Louisville. I tell you what else it would do. You know, all this talk about Louisville being a potential Big 12 member, it could be somewhat of a tryout, right? For those who think Louisville may end up in the Big 12 one day, let's see if Louisville fits in the Big 12. Let's see what kind of fan passion they bring. Let's see what kind of viewership numbers these games get, if it happens. But I'm telling you, as long as Villanova and Ohio U would be willing to move their games and Georgia drops Louisville off their schedule to add their extra game, it would work. Now, there is a little asterisk / caveat to this. If the ACC also adds an extra conference game, Louisville would not have any openings to do that, even if they lose the Georgia game. So it probably wouldn't work anyway. But it's still pretty darn fun to talk about, right? And ACC going to 9 conference games is going to be a little bit harder because they have an odd number of teams in their league. So it'll be a little bit trickier for them to make it work than it would be for the SEC teams. So anyway, I want to hear your thoughts on this scenario. What do you think about Louisville potentially replacing Alabama on West Virginia's 2026 and 2027 football schedules? Obviously, we'd all love it to be Pitt. If they're not able to make Pitt work and move the things around they need to move around, I think Louisville would be a very, very good plan B Even better, sorry, Marshall fans. I love Marshall. My daughter goes to Marshall. I, I would love to see that game back on the schedule at some point. But in this scenario right here, I think it makes more sense to play Louisville, assuming all the puzzle pieces fit into place. But I want to hear what you think. Let me know in the comment section. Also, please don't forget to hit the like button if you thought this video was the bomb, okay? If you thought it bombed, then hit the thumbs down button. But anyway, I also want to give a shout out to my paid VIP channel members of this episode. They are Bourbon Crazy, Jake T, Cheers Beers Mountaineers, Deb K, and Daryl Fletcher. Thank you all for being paid VIP members. It's a very inexpensive and easy way to support what I do here. It just takes the money out, a small amount of money out of your account every month. I have a $2.99 a month level and a $4.99 a month level. You get the random shout outs for everybody. The $4.99 level, what I call the club level, they also get early access to some content. And I'll also throw a special video up once in a while for my VIP, my club level VIPs. Now, if you also want to support me in other ways, you can go to the description box. There are a lot of other ways there. Want to remind, or want to announce rather, I am the representative of West Virginia for the 365 Sports newsletter. The very first newsletter launched this week. I'm going to leave a link to it in the description box. Please go check it out. Again, the 365 Sports, most of you probably know that the guys at 365, Craig Smoke, David Smoke, Paul Catalina, they are owned by Rogue Sports Network. I'm proud to be part of the Rogue Media family, and I'm proud to be part of the 365 Sports newsletter. Go check it out, and please sign up to get notified of all Big 12 content. You can get all your Big 12 content in one place with the 365 Sports newsletter. With that being said, I really appreciate you tuning into this episode. I hope the rest of your day is top shelf. God bless you, and Q Country Roads.